us in studio is Jason Justice. Good to have you on the show, Jason.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And listeners, his work has been recognized by the Museum of Modern Art in New York. He's also had his work displayed at the University of Washington in Tacoma. Very commendable, Jason, the work that you've done. I looked at the website, and really the first thing I could say was just wow. I was quite frankly stunned. But tell our listeners, what is it you do?
Basically, I'm a graphic designer, and so my work can be printed or it can be used for websites. And the work I do as a graphic designer is for social change causes. I work for progressive organizations, labor unions, environmental justice causes, any group organization that holds values that I think are important in building a better world are the kind of clients I want to work for. I'm actually interested in working for groups and organizations which are actively working to build a better world.
Well, how did you get your start in the social justice arena and then in graphic design 15 some odd years ago?
Well, it actually sort of happened by accident.
Okay.
I never actually meant to be a graphic designer. I never went to school for it. It wasn't really on my agenda. It sort of evolved naturally out of the work I was doing as an activist. I was involved in labor struggles and other activist work, and I found that I had a constant need to use graphic design, and so I started figuring it out. I started making picket signs and newsletters, flyers, leaflets, and other materials that could be used for the work I was doing. I got fired from several jobs for trying to organize a union. A friend of mine suggested I get a job as a graphic designer. I applied and got a job, a low-end job as a graphic designer, and I knew right away that I wanted to dedicate my work towards social change because that's what I had done all along, and that's how I even picked up these skills in the first place. I was not thinking about becoming a graphic designer. It's just using the work to get the message out, using the work to get the point across. It was using the work for activism.
Well, to that point, though, where do you get the inspiration for your visuals and themes?
I get my inspiration from the movements that I serve, largely. It's a very powerful feeling to be a part of these movements, a collectively powerful feeling. Some of the work comes from my own internal being. I create graphics and images, but some of the other work is a combination of other people's work, people's photography, other people's writing, and sort of what I do as a graphic designer is combine all these different elements together. And when you combine them together, you can create some really great stuff. And so a lot of my work is work that's a collective project in a lot of ways. I'm taking other people's art and my art, putting it together and making visuals out of it.
You had alluded to earlier, Jason, about how you choose the projects and groups you are involved with. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? What groups really strike to your core?
Well, groups that share the same values as I do. One of the things that I learned when I got a job as a graphic designer, when I started working in the industry, was that you're not supposed to have an opinion. You're supposed to do what you're told, design the projects you're given, and not have any say in what goes on. But for me, what I do and who I work for really matters because I think that what we do impacts the world around us. This all kind of came to a head, actually, when I was working for a print shop in San Francisco several years ago.
Okay.
A job came in, an anti-union job for Wells Fargo Bank, and I was working with a team of 3 other designers, and the employers wanted us to do this job. But as somebody who came out of the labor movement and had been fired for organizing, I was obviously opposed to this.
Yeah.
And so me and my fellow workers had to stand up and refuse to do the job. And it was a major deal. It was a major conflict. I almost got fired again over it for insubordination, but they couldn't fire all of us, and so they had to pass the job and let it go. But I realized at that point that I needed to dedicate my work towards social change. And so I started looking for and trying to connect with organizations and groups that shared the same values as me. And those values are radical values, values that say that we need to transform the world around us for the better, for the positive. And and when you start looking around at who's working in that field and who's actually trying to change their world, you'll find there's organizations all over the place, and groups and people. And those are the groups and people that I wanted to connect with. I was already connecting with them as an activist, but I needed to broaden my range and sort of be a service that could provide visual communication for the world of social justice.
So what is it you're looking to achieve by your work?
It's actually trying to change and transform our society. It's trying to reach and connect with everyday people, and inspire them to get involved and use their own power to make change in the world. One of the reasons that radicalism is misunderstood is because it's sort of misplaced in the media. It's used for extremist reasons, but the truth is that the word radical comes from the word root, which is to get to the root of the problem. And so if you're a radical, what that means is that you look at the root of the problem, where the source of the problem comes from, and you try to dig it up at the root source. And so a radical perspective is a permeating perspective that can permeate through every aspect of your being. And you can always look at the root of where things come from and try to figure it out from there, how to solve your problems. Our culture, our Western culture, tends to ignore radical ideas. Instead, we beat everything down. We smash it down, we suppress it, we stomp on it, we beat it out once it arrives. But we don't work towards radical solutions. We don't try to figure out where the problems come from in the first place and then try to root them out from the source. And so I think a radical perspective is actually the right perspective to have, because you're working for rooting out the problems wherever they come up.
But Jason, I wanted to turn to what I consider a major project that you've been involved in, the Army of None. What is the Army of None?
Well, Army of None is a book that was just released. It's written by Amy Allison, who is a veteran and a anti-war organizer now, and David Solnut, who's a longtime social justice and global justice organizer. And the book is sort of meant to counter the military's current propaganda system and the way they bring people into the military. The book sort of breaks down what the military does, how it does it, the lies they use in the recruitment process, and what their real purpose is. And then the second part of the book, the counter-recruitment book, talks about what you can do as an individual to counter military recruitment. And the third part's about, working towards greater, bigger, better change.
What is it you've done for the book?
Well, what I've done for the book is I've designed the book. And I've taken a lot of imagery that other photographers have photographed and illustrations other people have drawn, and even a lot of photos that the military has taken, because the military has taken lots of photos and they're publicly available and you can use them. I've taken a lot of the military's imagery and ideas, and we've sort of turned it around against them. I took their logo, their colors, their whole sort of like theme, and subverted it, so that now the whole military message has been subverted into a counter-military message. It's sort of throwing it back in their face in a positive way.
Yeah.
And it's really quite an impressive counter-recruitment guide, really, in my opinion. The whole name Army of None is a play on the Army of One idea. What's interesting about this book is it's taking a new approach to sort of trying to challenge the war, and all wars actually. Instead of relying on just mass protests, mass mobilizations every once in a while, which obviously haven't stopped the war, this is about going into schools, talking to people one-on-one, actually countering the military's efforts to get people involved. And so it's a new approach, it's a quieter approach, and it might be the approach that actually leads us to social transformation.
What is it you want Bay Area listeners to do?
Well, I think that what's important is that you utilize your pre-existing skills and figure out how you can use those to contribute to social change. I think that if you look around at what you're good at and what you like, and then you figure out how you can contribute to building a better world using your own interest, it can be a very effective way to promote social change. A lot of people try to figure out how they can get involved and what they can do, because it's there's a lot of things that need to be done, but what is it that you can do? How can you effectively get involved? And I think the easiest answer is just to look at what are you good at? What do you like? What are you interested in? I've always believed that the best place to organize is where you're at. And so you look at where you're at, what you do, and what you're involved in, and how can you transform the world right then and there.
Last question for you. What really matters?
Well, I think what really matters is that you follow your heart and do what you think is right in the world.